Okay, we're going to take a slightly different data set for this last segment, and the reason I'm going to do this is that this is a slightly more complex structure of data. One of the great things about Power BI is it really can work with any format of data. In this case, I've got an Excel spreadsheet with a much more matrix type setup, where I've got different data for different years down this row here. And then I've got this kind of stepped approach across the top here, where I've got the names of the cities and then the different product areas where we've made sales in, and then the actual values that we are really interested in underneath. Now, Power BI really does work best with columnar data. So the idea really is to try and format this so we've got one column for years, one column for cities, one column for the product categories, and then a column for the values. So let's look at how to do this. So I'm going to go and use the Get Data option again. And I'm going to choose Excel and Connect and go open the multi-level spreadsheet. And I'm just going to connect to the Excel spreadsheet itself. I'm not going to connect to any of the tables. I'm not connecting to any particular objects within the spreadsheet, just the raw data on those cells. Now, the first thing you're probably going to notice is the top row of our Excel spreadsheet has now been turned into column headers, and that's not going to help us here. If we look over here under the applied steps, you can see that it's changed type and it's promoted some headers. So we need to undo those before we can do any manipulation of this data. So I'm going to go ahead and click the little red X, change the type, and then I'm going to do the same to undo the promotion of the headers. So now you can see I've got my cities back as the top row of this data again. And I've got the product and the years over here. And now that we've undone the headers, all of our column headers here are now called columns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and so on. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of flip everything around so that we've got cities and products and categories in rows and columns. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the Transform tab. And I've got a whole range of options here that I can apply across tables and across individual columns. So let's transpose this table and treat rows as columns and columns as rows. So now you can see I've got cities in columns here. I've got the accessories outside the product categories, and then each year is now in its own separate column. So just like we had when we first imported this data, we want to push the first row of data up to be our column headers. And there's two ways we can do that. The first one is to come up here and click on this, and this will then take all of our years and make them our column headers. The other way is to come over here and click on the menu option here, and this gives me a list of all the options that I can apply to this table all in one go. So I'm just going to use the first row as headers. So as you can see, I now have one column for 2005, another for 2006, and another one for 2007, and so on and so on. Now, column 1 and 2 are almost there. So the first thing we need to do is give these column headers meaningful names. So I'm going to call this one City, and this one we're going to change to be our product category. But now I need to sort out these nulls. Now, one of the things that I can do is actually fill in any null values with the values from above. I've got a transformation option up here that will let me do that. Now I can either fill up or down depending on which way the data is going. So I'm going to fill down, and it's going to take the values and replace all the nulls with the value from above. Great, so I'm getting closer. So I've got my city column sorted out, and I've got my category column sorted out. So let's do something about these years. I just want one column for value, and then I want another column which has the repeated data for each year. To do that, I'm going to pivot all of this data. So I'm going to select all the columns that I want to do the pivot on. And then I've got a few different options that I have up here. I could pivot the column, or I can unpivot the column. We're actually unpivoting in this case. we're taking the currently selected columns and changing them into rows in the data combined with each of the values in the other column. It's a little difficult to explain, but once I've clicked on it, you'll see what's going on. We've taken each of the columns, one for each year, and we've pushed them down into this single column, which has been called attribute, which is the default name that it's given. And it's repeated the values within each of the cities and each of the category columns for each of those years. So I'm just going to rename attribute to year. I can now say I've got one row to show me all the values for each combination of city, category and year, which is exactly the sort of format that makes it really easy to build the reports. So what I need to do now is make my value column a whole number rather than being treated as text. And then just coming back over to the Home tab, we're ready to go, so we'll hit Close and Apply. So it's loaded the data here. And I can quickly start building some visuals. So let's just add a quick line chart showing our change of the time. And we'll just pick up the year and drop it into the axis. And we'll use the value and drop that into the values field. And as you can see, we've got a nice line graph based off of the data that we've put in. So let's create a new map and put our cities and values in there as well. So we'll put the city in with the location and the value in here. So just by doing a variety of transformations, I've taken a very strangely formatted set of data, or at least a very unstructured formatted data, and turned it into something much more columnar. That's much easier for PowerPoint to work with, much easier for you to start building visualizations and doing your own analysis on. And you can see there are some really rich transformations that Power BI Desktop has to help you do that.